We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust. Search but you stay lost. We are reaching for the stars, but we're making this too hard. And I wonder where you are. Mysterious, that's the part you always show. 'Cause you're too curious. Maybe you should take it slow. Mysterious.
Oh man, it was just building too. I hate having to jump off like right as that beat's picking up. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Maker That Money, that podcast where we talk about turning your hobby into your jobby. I am Pooch of Repkord. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Mr. Andrew Mayhall of 3D Gloop. And in the hot seat today, we've got Mr. Stephen Levedas. Am I saying that right, Stephen?
You did.
I have
You
had a
said
lot
that
of practice
totally right.
at this point, given that I've spelled your name wrong and all this stuff. For those that need the memory thing, it's Lavedas like fajitas. That's what I'm gonna remember here. And I'm sure Steve's heard it all, but there you go. Greetings in the chat, everyone that's with us. It's good to see you guys again. Pez Liz, Karen Chow Designs, Miss Vicky Soma, TJAW. Awesome to see you. And everyone else. Mitch 3D, good to see you. I know it's been a hot minute since we've been on, so I'm glad you guys haven't forgotten how to get here. Yeah, well, we've had some interesting circumstances, right, Andrew? I mean,
just a little bit.
A couple events, just some slight visits to the ICU for you. So we're very happy to see you back on your feet again, my friend, and glad that it was that you're on the mend.
Yes.
If you want to fill in everybody really quick on the happenings of that after we got back from Open Sauce, that was a scary bit.
Oh yeah, that was crazy. I went to Open Sauce, had a blast, and then on the flight home, I fell asleep. And my heart rate dropped to around 50 BPM, give or take. And that caused a blood clot to form in my right calf. About 12 hours later, that resulted in a pulmonary embolism. So I'm pretty sure the only reason why I'm here today is my Apple Watch. It started screaming at me, saying I had a very high resting heart rate. So if it wasn't for that, the doctors actually wouldn't have really figured out what was going on at the time. But they started treatment right away, and that's what prevented it from being a whole lot worse.
I'm really curious how much that watch has helped with situations like that, because we take for granted just having that tech on our wrist, and I would always thought it wasn't really a serious medical device, but it looks like it was a good indicator in this case, huh?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I remember I would remember getting into the emergency room, and then the doctor asking to see my phone so he can look at my health data because he
Oh,
saw that I was
wow.
wearing a watch. Because at the time they had no idea what was going on. I was, kind of coming in and out of consciousness, all sorts of stuff. So
That's really interesting. Well, we're
yeah,
happy. We're happy you're here. We're happy you're back at it. I know it sounds like you still have a decent road to recovery, but how has that been?
yeah. Still not 100%, but I'm getting there. Parts of my lungs unfortunately died. But it's not something that can't heal over time. So lots of breathing exercises that I'm supposed to do.
So
I'm on medication now.
when you say
So
died, though, that's not something that heals. It's just your body learns to
well,
do more with what it has
yeah,
left.
yeah. Basically, I
Got
mean,
it.
so parts of it, there's very small parts of it. They'll eventually get rid of those dead cells. They won't get replaced.
Mm.
But your body will just learn to live with it.
So
So yeah,
lung tissues like brain cells, you only have so many of them, and when they're gone, huh?
sort of, yeah. I mean, there are some instances, depending on the type of cells that die, apparently that can rebuild. So the doctors tell me. I'm not a doctor by any means, so I don't understand all of the different types, of cells. But
Wow.
yeah,
Well, as I said, we're happy to have you back. That's awesome. Stephen,
yep.
I appreciate you being with us today. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, and I'm really glad we could finally make it happen. I know it's mostly my fault given the crazy travel schedule that I've got these days. But I was excited that we got to connect at a couple of the events that we were recently at, which was nice. And now we can formalize our interview. But for those of you who don't know Stephen, we're going to give him an opportunity here just to give us the elevator pitch on who he is and what HueForge is, because it's really cool. Go.
Yeah, I'm super excited to finally get to do this. And both of us have crazy schedules. Yours a little bit more than mine in terms of travel, but just tons of work and hours. So I'm a software developer. I've been a software developer since high school, really, though, formally once from college. I started taking CS in high school and always wanted to do something in the graphics space and never was really able to do anything in the graphics space. The jobs where I live are not, tilted in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in industry for about 23 years, 24 years. And I guess at about 22 years, I started looking at this problem in 3D printing. I was doing a lot of 3D printing. I was doing a lot of functional and printer upgrade stuff. And someone asked me to make a sign for them that looked cool and preferably backlit. And that kind of put me down the road to what became HueForge. I've told that story a lot, but really it was an interesting, even with software, like they talk about how when you make hardware, the productization is the hardest part.
Yeah.
And that, you can get a piece of hardware that worked great on your bench, and then you go to try to mass produce it or even, volume produce it, and all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. Right.
Yeah.
And software is not really any different. I can get software that me and a couple other people can use pretty easily and have no problems with. But if I give it out to everybody, they're going to be like, what the heck is this? Nothing works. You can't do anything. So, around February or March of 2023, I had a pretty functional, like the core functionality of HueForge was all there. But I couldn't hand it to anyone besides myself and a couple of testers, and then have them be able to use it. So then it was literally like a 4-month death march. It, late at night after come home from work until 2 a.m, come home from work until 2 a.m.
Oh, man.
To get, every time I'd fix something, we'd find something else. Oh yeah, we can't do it. We can't put it out like that, until finally one week I said, it's going out this week. I don't care. I know it's not ready.
Yeah.
I know it's not ready. I'm pricing it like it's not ready, and I just need to get it out there to see what I really need to fix next.
You know what? We're gonna get more into the nitty gritty of that because I have a lot of questions on that. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So anyway, that I released in June of 2023, middle of June 2023. So we're just past a year.
All right.
And immediately became inundated with the customer service side of things that I hadn't had to worry about before. So now I'm trying to do software development plus customer service plus my day job. So that was an interesting, like learning how to automate that stuff, learning how to answer questions automatically, get people to actually know that the questions are there to be answered automatically. Like all that kind of stuff took me longer than it should have. I didn't spend time on that up front until finally I'm like, I got to spend time on this, because if I don't spend time on figuring out how to do this, I can't get anything else done.
Yeah.
Like all that stuff happened. And then in about the December time frame, I had 6 months of data. I had all my time, and I said, you know what, this is something I can try, and I would love to work. This is something I've always wanted to do, is to make things for a living, like create things for a living. And so my wife and I sat down, we had some conversations, and we said, all right, let's try it. And that was when I decided to go full time.
So okay, so you did say you have a day job though, but you are full time with this, or what?
No, I had a day job. January 12th was my last day of my day job.
Okay, so you're about
That's
6
so cool.
months in, a little more than 6 months in now on this being your full time gig. Okay,
Correct.
and you're still here, and you're still feeding your kids,
still here.
and your wife isn't completely freaked out and left or anything like that so far. So you're doing okay then, by those standards
correct.
at least.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep. My wife has actually decided I need more room in the basement. We need to make some modifications to my office.
You know what? That's the best.
That's always
when it
fun.
comes from them, right? When they're the ones that say it, and then you're like, okay, all right, Fantastic.
Just wait until.
It may be because I'm spilling out into the hallway in the basement anyway, but
I was gonna say just wait until eventually it takes over the entire house.
Yeah. Andrew's been there. So if you weren't aware, Andrew just bought a building and is in the process of finally getting out of the house, which is a process, but
it is a very big process.
yeah. Well, okay, awesome. So we've got a little background. So for those of you, first of all, if you haven't seen a HueForge, you've probably been under a rock. But I actually printed my first one, and for those that are watching on the YouTubes right now, I am holding up an example of a HueForge that Steve helped me with yesterday, and it just doesn't do it justice to not like to see it on video as opposed to holding it.
They're pretty wild.
3D printed, right? And so somebody might be like, well, what's the big deal? Why wouldn't you just take it to Kinko's and make a print of it? And because it's not that. It has depth, it has feel, it has like a dimension that is just really hard to describe unless you've held it. Show of hands in the chat. How many of you guys have run a HueForge at this point? Let's see what people have.
I mean, I'll be honest. I've never messed with it. I wanted to.
Andrew has it.
Can't
I know.
find the time.
I was late to the party too, man. So don't feel bad. But Andrew hates it because you can't. It's really hard to gloop them together. I said, unless you're getting a bunch of bigger pieces.
You just put words in my mouth all the time.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure. What was it? Additive Atom. It had some HueForge prints that needed to be glooped together. So
I was referring to these. What were they, Steve? Like 0.04. Wait, no, 0.4.
Yeah, 0.04 was your layer height.
Layer heights. I mean, that's like super thin, right? So I was being silly in terms of like if you were to actually try to glue the layers together, that would be an impossible.
That would be hard.
Yeah, thing. But Steve, I'm sure you've got some much better examples than my little rock thing that you sent here. This is a 4-color that I just did on my Mark IV quickly yesterday, so I could say I had something. But you got anything you want to share or show our audience here that are watching?
Well, the problem is my AI background removal is going to try to remove them, but I do have this tiger that I really like.
Ooh, I like
that should show up. This one was printed with a 0.2 just because it's small. If I had printed it larger, it wouldn't have needed the 0.2 nozzle. So I don't want people to think you need a 0.2 nozzle to get the details just because I printed it small. And on the side here, you can see how the gradients work. This is literally each one is one different layer height, and then it shows you how the colors blend based on that, based on how they stack on top of each other. So this one is in a mode we call color pop, where the grayscale's on the bottom and the color's on top. And so you can see that the bottom is basically grayscale, but I did add a little bit of color to it. And then the top is pretty much your oranges and reds.
That is really cool.
I mean, that looks like a photo print. I mean, at least from the screen.
That's what I'm saying. It's impossible to really tell without like actually like running it and seeing it. And you're like, this is 3D printed, and it's such a neat application.
That must be the most common. Well, besides, I've never seen this before. I've seen them online, but the photos didn't do them justice. It's like the most common thing we get at shows.
Yeah.
So you hold them in your hand, you don't really understand. And then it was always fun when we are in the Discord chat and someone prints off their first actual HueForge print in the HueForge Discord, and then they put off the printer and they start freaking out, and you're like, yeah, that's what it is.
That's exactly it. I was doing the same thing, even like watching it print and like seeing it come together, and it doesn't even look, when I look at, I've done 3D printing for just about a decade now, and when I look at the slice that HueForge actually creates, and I look at it and I'm like, that's just gonna bork a printer like you wouldn't believe. I mean, it's just such little fine detail. I'm like, that's not even printable. And then it's just like magic to watch it come together. I'm like, wow, it does work. And that's hand waving over a lot of details, because like there is some nuance to the slicing and getting your profile dialed in and getting your filaments and understanding that transmissive density and or transmissive distance. Is that it? TD?
Transmission distance.
Transmission distance. So basically, it's a metric of how transparent or opaque your filament is. I think
Correct.
Early on in 3D printing, we were doing lithophanes, right? The backlit thing.
I remember those.
And I mean, they're still around and they're still really cool, but used to the idea of thinking about how light passes through if you were backlighting something. HueForge is it fair to say it's the opposite of that? Because you're applying light through it from the front, so there's different wizardry happening here.
I mean, it is different, but it's also basically the same.
Okay.
I mean, HueForge started with lithophanes, right? HueForge started as a backlit image generator. In fact, the first name of HueForge before it was HueForge was the Color Lithophane Builder.
CLB.
I mean, it was a programmer's interface. It was for me. It was,
That's
so
awesome.
And when I first saw Ian doing what I thought he was doing backlit lithophanes, I'm like, hey, you're already doing this on your own. You'd be a great tester. Can you help me test my software? And he's like, no, these aren't backlit. These are front lit. There's no light going through them. And he was doing all that math, like all that intuitive color blending in his head.
Wow.
And I said, and he wasn't doing color. He was doing black and white because the color is so hard to do in your head. But he was doing black and white. It was still super impressive. They look fantastic. And at that time, it was very fortunate timing, because at that time I said, oh, well, I'm really confident in my color model and I see how to get there from here. I'm sure it'll take some iteration, but it won't. And it really was like a week of work between the two of us. And especially because he could just look at something and say, that's not right.
Yeah.
Like you need to do this to make it right. You need to do this to make it closer to right. And then I was able to say, okay, it's not that exactly, but I can change it to make it closer to right. And then after about a week, he didn't have to print stuff. He'd be like, oh, this is right. And then he started going in color and started doing stuff. So, but it really, it's not exact. It is kind of the same thing, but in the reverse, but really it is still about light going through filament and then coming back out of filament and giving you color. So it's just much shorter distances.
Yeah, it's interesting. And sorry, you brought up Ian's name, and I had the pleasure of meeting him at Rocky Mountain Rep. Really great guy out of the UK. And is it fair to say he's kind of like the artistry background equivalent? So you guys collaborated. Can you talk about the nature of your relationship, your partnership? Is HueForge the both of you? Is it just you? How does that work?
Okay, so we he definitely me seeing his prints was definitely the idea that sparked this, like, let's flip over and do it the other way. Let's do the front lit. And that really was the value. Like, I think I could have sold some copies of Lithophane Forge or whatever, whatever we're going to call it, if it's not, because they did make cool layer swap lithophanes. You're much more limited because you have to do one color family. You can't do all the things you can do in HueForge, but it would have been just one more way to do lithophanes, right? Color lithophanes. It would have been just another way to do it. There's multiple ways to do it. Whereas HueForge was a new thing. And so when HueForge, he helped me test it, and then he helped me made pieces to put on Twitter and stuff for me to retweet and stuff, and get more attention to it and have people say, whoa, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And get interest on it. And so when HueForge took off, he's not, he's a plumber by trade, but he's definitely an artist. Like, he's a plumber by trade, but he's an artist. Like, what he really is an artist. And the plumbing pays the bills, right? And
listen, there's artistry to plumbing too. I've seen some pretty wild
I
stuff.
mean, yeah.
And he is he's in the UK, which causes all kinds of issues for businesses and things like that, US, UK. So what we ended up doing was a royalty agreement where I basically pay him the idea. And so he does have a royalty cut of HueForge, but he isn't an employee. He isn't even a 1099 or anything. He just gets royalties
Nice.
on revenue.
Nice.
That's really cool.
That's a sweet deal
So-
right there. Good for him. Well, we'll have to we'll have to have him back too, because he's a fascinating guy to talk to as well at some point. So maybe as a follow-up episode we can do that. We just kind of threw this together last minute, but it would be awesome to get his take on stuff too. So sorry, there's more.
Sure. No, I mean, so basically, what I was going to say is, and then he really focuses on the how do I use the heck out of HueForge? How do I use the heck out of my filaments? He did a ton of the early filament library additions, calculating TDs, printing out the test prints, things like that, so we could have a good sized library at launch of different filaments. But I mean, like, I'll get in a conversation with him, and he'll be talking about putting one layer in to get this color cast and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, I do that, but that's not like what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on how to make it be able to do more stuff for people. And so I always joke that, and then, since then, and she's just a user, but she's had really good success with it. Cyanide Sugar Esther out of Australia. She does amazing stuff with it. So I always joke. Now they're kind of like my first testers. When I have a really new feature, it goes to those two first. And then I have another internal testing group that once they're like, okay, this basically works, we'll push it to the whole internal testing group. I always joke that I add features so that I can be better than them for a little while until they figure out how it works, and then they're better than me again. So
yeah. It's I think that's a really cool strategy, and it's interesting coming from the product side of things to think about how that applies in software. So we typically historically have been somewhat heavy in talking to product developers. But we've talked to the guys that ran Lightburn, our favorite laser cutting and laser engraving software. Jason, amazing team, incredibly talented software developers there. So hearing origin stories of that, I am always fascinated by it, and in a lot of ways jealous, because when you have a virtual product that you can just distribute without having to do all the work of packing and shipping and worrying about UPS beating stuff up or whatever. That's nice. But obviously it's got its drawbacks too. So talk about your experience, one in, getting started in software development, and then actually building a business around it. Because the coding is, like you said, probably not the hard part. It's the teaching and the supporting and all the things that, really aren't intuitive. I think there's so many different ways people can use this, and there's so many sliders and options when you fire up HueForge. And a lot of people aren't going to watch all your fantastic videos. So anyway, there's a lot there to unpack. Go.
You're definitely overrating my videos. So it's one of the things, like, I never wanted to be a content creator because the content creation is a grind. And I didn't, not that product development isn't a grind, it is. But, I was like, I don't want two grinds, right? I want one. But it became very clear early on that, no one was going to be able to put out a tutorial that could explain what HueForge did better than me. And so even though they're not going to necessarily be the most polished tutorials, they're going to be the most informative.
Right.
And the most accurate. Because, so I still have my playlist of tutorials, still has the Teaching Tech HueForge video as the first one on the playlist, because I think it's the best introduction overall for, though it's old version and have updated over, it's the best starting video. Real thing. So it took me a while to figure, and the couple of months were crazy because of the maker deal. The maker deal was insane, and people got their first price in from Paul Baker. When they said to do that, I was, you pay me a bunch of money, okay, but paying me a bunch of money, okay, I'll take that. And anyway, that the number of people per day purchasing and the number of requests coming in, it was just so big. And it wasn't until near the end of that I started really figuring out how to automate responses and turn my customer service from like an hour in the morning and 2 hours right after work into, like 20, 30 minutes in the morning and 15, 20, 30 minutes at night. Some nights worse, some nights better. But at the same time, also sales fell off. Obviously you can't maintain that launch fervor especially when the coupon goes away. So sales fell off, and they fell to a level that became much more sustainable in terms of A, like I think this could keep going, and B, my support requests went down significantly in terms. There was an interesting like threshold cutoff where all of a sudden I went from getting 10 to 15 support requests a day, most of them quickly serviceable, to 1.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, this is much, much, much better. Part of it was my automated responses, but a lot of it was just that there literally weren't as many people buying it and getting into it new each day. And also as I added new releases. So that was the biggest thing for me at the beginning, was figuring out I had all these new features I wanted to put in, but it turned out to be like, no, I need to fix things that people have trouble with understanding more than I need to add a new feature to give them a new whiz-bang capability.
And that's got to be a tough thing to reconcile, because as a coder, as a programmer, you probably enjoy the former more. It's like, oh, I want to add features, I want to do these other things. Like it feels, I mean, I struggle with that on my product side. Like I hate the documentation process. But it is so critical in terms of the time savings, in terms of answering the support tickets and emails, and just keeping customers happy overall too. You learn really quickly in business, no matter what you're in, that nothing is as intuitive as you think, that nobody is going to understand anything as well as you do. And it must be fascinating for you, Steve, if you were to like do a screen share with people and they fire up HueForge and they just start with their process, and you're like, oh, like I would have never guessed somebody would do it that way.
Do it that way. Yep.
Yeah. So
there's a big, that's one of the things you start learning is there's like 2 or 3 ways that people do it wrong. And so then I'm like, people will tell me, oh, it doesn't work and nothing happens. And I'm like, okay, can you show me a screenshot of your HueForge window showing me what you're doing? Because if I can see a screenshot of your HueForge window, now I can look at it and say, oh, this is what you're doing. This is what you misunderstand. Let's fix that for you. But it took a long time to understand like what the common things people were doing wrong were.
Yeah, and that's an interesting way to kind of focus group the whole thing, and maybe rethink the way that you develop your user experience, and that's why we have UX UI developers as like almost a separate thing from like the actual code monkeys that are writing the code, because they're a completely different side of the brain that's being used. And it's a shame. A lot of times we probably sacrifice performance and feature set in the name of accessibility to as many people as possible, if that's a good way to put it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some of that, though. I will say that, I mean, so I think the first point release was literally just like bug fixes and a couple of quality of life issues that people found right away. And then it took me a little longer, and I got the next release out, and that was a few more features and a lot more quality of life. And I look back, I actually was going to do a video or something on what HueForge looked like at the beginning versus what it looks like now, and I brought up the old one, and I was like, this is so painful. Why did anyone buy this from me? Like, this is what the heck. I don't remember it having this problem when I released it. It may have been the issue, like I literally solved it in the point release the next week, within 5 or 6 days of the first product release. But I had to get that product out the door. And actually, so I've been working in software for like 23 years, and I'd never done a product release.
See, this is what I wanted to get into.
Yeah. I had always been the guy who just, you need this feature, add it. We need this bug fix it. We need that, and I just push those into the production pipeline, and then my job was done.
Yeah.
So I had never done a product release.
That's so cool. So you're six months into being full time, a little bit more than a year. Can you kind of describe that process at the very beginning of, I have this idea, I want to turn it into a product, because as you just said, you've never launched a product before.
Yeah. So I'm notoriously bad at time estimates. So, I kept thinking, oh, this week I'll have it. It'll be ready. Oh, no, next week. And I was working my tail off and making all kinds of changes. And it was just like, nope, next week. Nope, next week. Nope. So the process really was, there was a point at which Ian and I both agreed we have all the features we need to release this as a product, right? It's good enough at what it does that it can be released as a product. But then we went down the list of like, this needs to be changed. This needs to be like, we need to do this so that users, like one of the things that HueForge does that most people don't know is that it lies to you about where the layer swaps are. it tells you that it's swapping colors at like layer 11, but really the color is only going to layer 10. But it does that because all the Slick 3R slicers, which is the primary slicers that most people use, on the slider on the side, want the first layer of the next color, not the last layer of the current color. And so we had to add one. So we went back and forth. Like, do we add one, or do we tell people to add? Like, how do we do this? And so we ended up coming back and saying, no, we just hide it all and say add one. So like things like that. And like, you know, saving needs to do this, and that, and loading needs to do this. Like it was going back and forth through like, and then he would keep finding bugs and I would keep finding bugs. And, you know, it was kind of figuring out which bugs were the most important bugs.
Sure. So when you're deciding now, like, okay, we have this thing, we think that it's ready to be released, we just got to get it out the door. What since you've never kind of been in this space before, how did you decide, like, this is what we're going to charge for it? Like, are we going to build a company, or is it just going to be something where, hey, we want to see if people are interested in it, and then we'll go from there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so I made a couple of very intentional choices at the beginning. I intentionally priced personal use very, very cheaply for two major reasons. One of which was I knew that I the version number is 0.5. I knew this was an early access release. I knew that this was not complete and it was going to have bugs and it was all kinds of issues with it. And so by pricing it super cheaply, it's like, please complain. I don't care. It was $12, right? Okay. So it was a cheap, you know, very, very cheap personal use pricing. And then the goal was also that I didn't want, like, I wanted to get some money for what I had done, but I didn't want to like punish people for the amount of time I put at it. So it was like, okay, I'm going to get some money for what I've done. But if you just want to use this as a hobbyist printer, I don't want you to pay a ton for it, but I want you to pay a little bit so that you're not like, you know, you should give me all this stuff for free, right? And then it was, I mostly wanted commercial to pay for, I wanted some recurring revenue, and I mostly wanted commercial to pay for the ongoing development because I feel like it was pretty easy. It was a new thing. But one of the other reason I priced it really, really cheaply for personal use was I know that 3D printing is super viral. And so if, you know, people start printing rock heads on stuff, then everyone's printing rock heads on everything. And if people start printing, you know, flexi lizards, then everyone's printing flexi lizards, you know, so if you see enough of it. So I figured if enough HueForge prints started popping up in people's Facebook groups and Discords and stuff like that and Reddit, then you'd start getting a lot more people coming to, oh, it's $12. Yeah, I'll pick it up. Like that was just to get the critical mass of audience to get the ball rolling. And so that was, actually, it was interesting because, and then the Polymaker came along like a week or two before launch and said, we want to do the coupon deal.
Can you explain that deal a little bit and kind of what it meant for this whole project in general?
Yeah. So, okay. So actually I ended up getting, and I don't remember how it happened, but I ended up getting invited to go on Z and Z, their Monday night show.
Shout out to Liz and Zombie.
Yeah, Liz is in here.
Yep.
Yeah. And because they were all about color swaps and stuff like that, and it might have been it might have been part of the color swap competition they were having in the Polymaker Discord. That may have been what started the conversation. I'm not actually positive, but anyway, I went on that, and then Nick was watching, and as everyone knows, Nick is always looking to support the community, and so he said, "Hey, can we have a meeting tomorrow?" And I said, "Okay." So I took a meeting, and he came out and immediately said, "That's right, Liz was first." He said, first of all, let's get you a bamboo, because I didn't have a bamboo at the time. I was doing it all manually. And then he said, we want to make HueForge free for users. I was like, okay, what are you talking about? You want to try to buy it out from me? What are you talking about? He said, no, we want to give that. So he said, any tier they buy at, we'll give it, US and Canada, we'll give them a coupon equivalent value of filament from Polymaker. And I was like, and he said, and we're not asking for exclusivity or anything. Absolutely not the way we work. Why would I not take that? Right? Like, it's just people are gonna buy higher than they would originally. I'm gonna get more income coming in to start with.
Yep.
I was like, okay, like why would I say no to this? Right?
Sure.
And so that's what that's what we launched with. That was all manual though. Neither one of us knew how to automate that at the time.
Okay.
And so every day I'm sending him a list of US and Canadian buyers that he has to then send out coupons to manually.
Oh, jeez.
Ouch. Yeah.
and some days that was hundreds, like it was. So yeah, that was crazy. Now we have I still have the polymaker coupon now for personal use, but I've automated that. I've learned how to automate that. I said we're not doing this again if it's manual, because then sometimes you'd be like, he'd be too busy to send out 300 coupons that day, and so they'd be pushed, and people would be like, where are my coupons, I'm like, they're coming. They've never failed on a coupon, just like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
So they spent a lot of money on HueForge coupons in filament. They provided a lot of filament in HueForge coupons.
Yeah.
And Mitch, I use Shopify. Yeah. And then, but basically that was fantastic, and it pushed things. So it was interesting because Ian and I both, like, from who we talked to and who we interacted with on Twitter and other social media, we kind of had an idea of who knew what HueForge was, so that when we launched, what we would be able to sell. And we actually nailed our launch weekend. We came up with a prediction, and it was pretty much spot on.
Wow.
And then we were expecting, okay, now it's going to dip a lot, and we're going to wait for people to start posting HueForges out there or something, and then it should climb back up. And then on Monday, and I had given him an advanced copy, but I had no idea it was coming out. On Monday, Lost in Tech posted his video on HueForge, and then it was off to the races. And it was, from there,
Very cool.
things took. So it was a lot of things that just lined up that we didn't expect.
Very cool.
Liz comment in the chat: HueForge packs make a great gift as a 3D printing starter pack. That's a fantastic point.
Awesome.
You've created. I mean, the partnership makes perfect sense. Just given that Polymaker probably has the most robust profile of options of colors and whatnot out there, at least in the basic filaments that I've seen. I'm hard pressed to think of anybody else that's covering the gamut as well as they do. So, I mean, it makes perfect sense. I think you've created an interesting, I don't say a monster, but you've created a whole new segment in the space of 3D printing. That there are probably a non-zero number of people that have gotten into 3D printing solely because they've been interested in HueForge more than anything. Have you spoken to users like that by chance?
I have spoken to a few users like that. They do tell me, I saw some HueForge print. I was already thinking about getting into 3D printing. I saw the A1 was back. I saw the A1 Mini was for sale. That was that's off in the road. Like, if you're going to come into 3D printing for HueForge, it's going to be on the lower end, more entry-level printers. And I got an A1 Mini, and I started HueForging, and I love it.
Yeah.
I don't get that a ton, but I do get it.
I'm assuming that's
I
with
think
the
a lot
combo.
of people.
Are there a lot of people doing the automation, so using the little AMS
light
and whatnot? I mean, that does save a ton of time. Like, I did manual swaps on this one, and this was just like a 5-hour print. So even at a 150 by 150 millimeter dimension, like that's, and this is only a mil, like 1.1 millimeters thick,
just over a mil thick.
Yeah, that still takes
5 hours.
5 hours to do, because it's like doing so many little things. So obviously to be able to automate that is fantastic. And then with the Bamboo guys and other options, like tool changing and other things, like to automate that is just really, really cool. But still takes a good amount of time. So
it does take time.
Yeah, but having that that robust library of colors is so critical if you're really getting into this, right? Like, because that's where a lot of especially as we get into the future and we start to see people wanting to do more color match type stuff.
Yeah,
I imagine.
Yeah, though of course, because no one cared about the transmission distance of their filament until HueForge came out, no one has really been controlling for the transmission distance of their filament. And so you can get two spools that look the same, but they have different, significantly different transmission distances. Yes, absolutely. And even with good, with the budget brands, it's of course worse. And with the brands that white label everything and sometimes change vendors, it's pretty bad. It can be bad. But even with brands like Polymaker or Prusa or some of the ones who really make all their own stuff and do their best that they can do to do the closest, tightest tolerances on their filament, they haven't been paying attention to the transmission distance of their filament. So it does vary. So you can't take what's in the library as gospel. You do need to look at yours and say, this isn't right. Like my prediction came out differently from my print. Something's wrong. Let me change. Let me figure out what it is.
Now this is really an interesting subject to me because I would have assumed. So I've extruded, or I've been part of a couple of filament making workshops, and I've seen, and so like going up to Protopasta, for example, and when they do their compounding and all that stuff. My assumption was they've got a pretty consistent recipe, but there's factors that if they're trying to control for color matching doesn't necessarily mean that transmissive distance is part of that.
We're gonna have to see that a little bit because now people are starting to monitor it.
Mm.
So I know that Polymaker believes that their color consistency wasn't as good as they thought it was, and now that they're controlling better for it, their TD is going to be better, more consistent as a result.
Interesting.
But we don't have the data on that yet. We now have the TD1 that Ajax made in order, and that they can test those and pull batch checks and things like that and make sure that they're correct. Yeah, the TD1 right there.
Yeah.
I found mine yesterday. I couldn't find mine yesterday when we were talking, but I found mine. This is serial number 0. This was actually one of the production prototypes that Ajax took to Earth, actually.
Mine is 392.
Same hardware.
391 above yours. Okay. Yeah, but what's interesting about that is you have some. I mean, I can think of probably like 10, product ideas in support of this whole endeavor, and you have some really interesting, obviously, partnership opportunities with the filament makers. But then, like, you start to look at stuff like this, and now you've got new quality control mechanisms for filament manufacturers. So if you get pro grade equipment that can actually exist on the line so that they can monitor this along with, ovality and diameter and all the other things that they're already monitoring for. I would arguably think that this is going to get everyone to better, more consistent material.
I would think so. But
cool. And that's going to take somebody, really, I don't know if that's an Ajax thing. I don't know, what that is. And I don't know how much work, that's going to entail to be, is it worth adding additional sensor packages? I don't know.
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. I think at the very least, batch checking would be pretty fast and easy. So what's amazing to me is that, I have this product that's spawned another product, and he's, able to make, a good side income from a product that's literally only useful because of HueForge. Well, it's not true. It is useful for other purposes, but no one thought about, I need this.
Exactly.
And actually, so I did dabble a little bit in filament. I had a line of filament made to fill in some of the voids in the filament space for HueForge, and high TD grays, high TD dark colors, basically. And we sent the manufacturer a TD1, an early kit, and he said after he came back, he said, I actually realized we're way over pigmenting our filament. It doesn't need to be this high. And so they're reformulating everything. He said, if we're under a 4 TD, you're not seeing any infill through the walls. You're seeing a consistent solid color. Everything looks opaque. And so we were down at like a 1, and we don't need to be at a 1. We can be at a 4 and still be super consistent and super, look exactly the same to our customers. And we can use less pigment, and pigment's expensive. So I was like, hey, there's a value add for a filament manufacturer to know that, you don't need to be dosing as much as you maybe think you do.
I think you really hit something on the head there, that you're onto something when you start to create an industry around what you're doing, and you've done that, which is fantastic. Whether it's with the filament manufacturers, with the accessories, I mean, you've really unlocked something interesting and special. And again, until you actually participate in the magic, I don't think it quite resonates, or so that is to say, go to an event, see the stuff that he's showing off. Obviously, like, there are people that are just using commercial licenses, running product and selling product based on using AI to create art, or art that they've created to create prints. And then where it gets really wild is seeing some of the stuff like what Cyanide Sugar has done, and others, where you're integrating a 3D print like with the HueForge in a completely different dynamic diorama, whatever you want to call it.
Well, and she did those book covers too for the Michael Crichton, James Patterson novel.
Yeah.
She got contacted. Someone saw her book covers that she was doing on her own, and a publisher contacted her and said, "Hey, can you make these for us too?" And she was able to she was able to quit her second job because she was making those. So I was super excited about that.
You're a job creator, man, in multiple
Yeah.
ways. I mean, you've got your own thing, and you're creating an industry. And what's interesting, I think we talked about this a little bit at Rocky Mountain Rep Rap, but I'm really going to be curious if we start to see printer manufacturers start to make basically the pizza oven equivalent of a 3D printer that you don't
short
need
printers,
Z
yeah.
height. Like, and think about how many you
No.
can stack in. I mean, if you were farming these things out, it's so cheap, relatively speaking, on a business scale to just throw more printers at the problem than it is to like try to make the printer go faster and all this other stuff.
Yep.
And you could stack a lot of printers that theoretically could ditto print. You know, you could lock XY. I mean, there's all kinds of interesting things that you could do if you were just in the business of cranking HueForges.
Yep. Yeah, one of the things that we kind of as a community, especially as you start stacking AMS units or, you know, lots and lots of entries into trade rack or ERCVAs, is we'd like to have the ability to route filaments between printers without having to pull them out of the box. So some sort of muxer that you could say, I have 5 AMS units. They're all running separate from the printers. And then this muxer just sends the filament to the printer that needs it. And I actually think for a print farm, that would be pretty great too.
Sure.
I mean, I'll take that a step further. One of the things when I get asked, like, what's the future hold and all that stuff, we just saw it at Rapid. Remember, we're starting to see it come down. I mean, it's not new, but pellet printers being brought down to consumer-grade equipment. The reason that's exciting to me isn't necessarily because of the pellet printer. I think a lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, cool, because spools, you know, take up a lot of space and, you know, it's just a lot easier to ship a bag of filament and you have a lot less waste and all that stuff. That's great. That's true. Yes. But the vacuum system transport and the drying systems and all the industrial standards that exist on industrial side with pellet printing and the benefits from that, when you start to think about material transport and handling and drying and automation, you know, if you're just moving pellets through a vac tube to various machines, not only can you do transport, but you can theoretically do compounding and all sorts of interesting blending where you can actually automate the process without even having to, like, you know, change extruder. It'd be a different process. I mean, and there's a lot of stuff that would have to happen, but I mean, all very feasible and would be so cool to see. So farming HueForges, people have to be doing this. I have to imagine somebody's doing it. It's not a fast product to make, but if you've got a reasonable size farm,
so there are certain products that are relatively fast to print. There's Macy Makes has been doing bookmarks on Etsy.
Oh yeah.
You can do quite a few bookmarks at once. Lornayan, who's also in our Discord, he also does bookmarks, the product, and he can do, you know, you can do either duplicates, or some people most recently have been doing one scene across like multiple bookmarks. Each bookmark looks good by its own, but if you wanted to own the whole set, you'd have the scene across the bookmarks as well, which I think is kind of a cool way to go. It's all the same colors. You get 4 or 5 products out of it. Maybe it takes you 5-6 hours to print, but 5-6 hours for 4 or 5 products is really not that bad of a calculus.
Sure.
No, it's not. And again,
so you
throwing more machines at the problem if you really are making a business of it.
Right.
I mean, you'll pay for that HueForge commercial license in no time, I'll tell you that.
Right. That's actually, and that was, you asked about pricing earlier. One of the things I did with pricing was, what is a no-brainer license price for, I want to sell prints? What is a no license, you know, like, and so I looked at it and I said, oh, you know, if someone comes to me and says they want me to print my family portrait for me in HueForge, what am I going to charge? Probably $30 to $40, probably $3, you know, for the design time and the print time. And that's basically the cost of the add-on cost of the license to the basic HueForge license. So it's kind of built in to be like, I got the personal license. I started printing stuff. People said, hey, could you print that for me? Hey, could you print that for me? I'd pay you $30. I'd pay you $25. And then you're like, oh, it's $27 right now to upgrade to the next license tier. Yeah, let's do it. It's no brainer. Let's just upgrade. And everything has been about like locked door policing rather than lockdown policing. So it's all about being honest rather than me trying to force you to be honest.
Sure.
I knew one of the things I got with was if I put a whole bunch of access controls on the software, first of all, people get by it anyway. And second, I will have so much extra support support issues with it not working or problems
Mm-hmm.
that at the beginning, especially, I just said no. Now, we may come to a time where I do add some sort of keying, but mostly for the ability for like automatic upgrades or direct linking to upgrades. Because if you're keyed, I can just put the upgrade out there and you can download it and not have to go to your account page and get a download link and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Mostly for customer ease of use rather than for me trying to lock it down. Because what I find primarily is most customers are super honest.
Yeah.
There's
Not
always
like me.
people
I
that
just
give
went
it
and
away
found it on a torrent, and I just right down. Just right down.
They are, they are out there. I know they're
I'm
out
kidding.
there. Though I did
I'm
have a
kidding.
couple people say,
very
I did
happily
have a couple
did.
people say, like, I couldn't get the new version. I couldn't figure out how to get the new version, and I went and looked for it and couldn't find it.
Yeah.
And like they own the license, but I can't figure out how to find the new version.
I just went back to my
I gave them
email.
the information they needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, but well, no, because if you bought in, that was one of my teething pains, right? I started with a Shopify store, and I didn't want to spend a lot of money on it because we didn't have a lot of money when I started. Not that we have tons and tons now, but we like literally were in a pretty tight financial spot when I started. And one of the great things about software is it's time and effort, and it's not money.
Yeah.
But when I started my Shopify store, I went with the free downloader tool that they have. And it's pretty garbage. It's fine for like a single file that you're just distributing. So like I still have some model files there. It's fine for that, but it's not great. And when you started adding, when I went to go add Mac OS, it was just sticking everything into one zip archive. So if you wanted to download it, you download it, you get this weirdly named, numerically named zip archive that had both the Windows version and the Mac version in it.
Yeah.
And who wants that? Nobody wants that. And so I said, let me find a better downloader. Well, I found a better downloader, did a lot of research and stuff. But the one thing I forgot to check was, can I migrate all my old customers into the new downloader? And the answer was no.
Yeah.
And,
of course it was.
Right. So, and I, for a couple more update cycles, I put out updates saying, hey, you need to go get this new downloader as part of the update email. But no one reads the email. They just click the link and download their stuff. And so I still have people to this day who haven't updated downloaders. And so they're like, I'm on 6.5. Where is the new version? I can't find it. Can you send me the link? And I have to send them the fact page in the store. Here's how you get the new link. Just go do this. You get it for free. You get an automatic coupon code that lets you, get it for free. But you just need to buy it again so you can get on the new downloader.
So I think I bought mine recently enough that when I just go back to my email, it's a link to the new downloader page. And it just had the most recent one on there.
It was early August of 2023 that I shifted over.
Yeah. I think I bought it at the beginning of the year or something like that. Like I said, I'm always late to the party, but that's intentional because I got to see if people actually stick around. There's a lot of fly by nights. Okay, in 3D printing, and if you prove to me you're still here in a year, maybe I'll check out your stuff. That's my thing. Let's we've got about 10 minutes left. We might go. Are you okay on time? I want to check in because I know you've got a family
I'm fine on time.
Olympic swimmers and whatnot that you have to attend to and other stuff. But we may go just a touch long because there's some interesting stuff here. I want to talk about starting a business because like most people we talk to, it sounds like you kind of just fumbled your way into like, I guess I have a business here. And I mean, like that's a very common thread for a lot of people we talk to. I can't imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't imagine you sitting down and writing a business plan and going out and getting a business loan or any of that stuff.
Nope.
It was just one day you flipped the switch and you said, well, you quit your job and you said, I'm doing this now. And hopefully we can get enough money to keep going into the bank account so that keeps the wife and everybody happy.
Yeah, so, so I talked to people who I knew who ran businesses or were high up in businesses and said, do I need to have an LLC before I launch the software? What do I need to do? And they said, don't worry about an LLC until you've made like 12K. Like, it doesn't really matter until you've made about 12, 15K. And then worry about an LLC. And so I said, okay, I'm just going to launch and start selling, and we'll see what happens. And I don't think we're surprising anyone to tell anyone I crossed 12K in the first weekend. So I was like, okay, well, I need a business.
Yeah.
So,
there you go.
Okay, I need a business. So then by I think I did wait, I think a week. I think I waited. It was 10 days later that my formation was official with the state of Virginia, where I live. So I think I looked. I did a little research, like which one do I need, and so I went quickly into an S corp, and then I very quickly talked to my financial planner and said, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? Like, how do I need to handle this? Because all of a sudden these these checks are coming into my personal bank account, and I know that that's not right at this point in time. I need to start pushing them into another bank account.
Yep.
And so we had some conversations, and he introduced, and I said, and I'm going to screw up the accounting, so please give me an accountant. And so he gave me two options. And I talked to him and said, I like this guy, and went with him, and I'm paying him for my accounting and my payroll, because I'm like, I am not that guy. Like, I'm not the guy who's going to sit down and do the books properly at the end of the month. Like, I need someone else to do that for me. So I hired an accountant. I'm like, the things that are going to get me in trouble, I'm going to pay people to do for me.
So from the jump,
I don't want to get in trouble.
From the jump, you
jump.
had that sense to do that. Interesting. Okay, good.
I got the accountant, I think, in July. I don't think I got him immediately, but I got him like mid to late July.
Close enough to the start. Yeah.
And I said, and here's the problem.
4 years.
And the very, very first thing I did, so as the money started coming in, I said, well, we don't know how long this is going to last. So let's just pay off all of our debt that's not the house.
Yeah.
Let's pay off everything that could. If everything stops tomorrow, we're still going to be in better shape than we were.
The boat, the plane, all that. Okay, good.
The cars, the credit cards. As I said, money was really tight. We'd had some
the Fabergé egg collection. Sure. Okay.
Right. So let's pay all that stuff off.
Yeah.
So I paid off all of our debt. Had no debt except for the house, and then said, okay, let's just hold on to it. At that point, I stopped spending money from the business, except like specific business needs. I got a new computer, a couple things like that, but stopped spending money because I was like, I'm going to screw this up.
Yeah.
So let's just stop.
Right.
We're okay now. We don't need the money. And my wife's like, can we just pay for swimming next year? Because as you said, we have 3 kids swimming highly competitively. They're not Olympic, but highly competitively. That's very expensive. It's like private school for all 3 of them.
Sure.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Almost. And so I was like, let's set aside money for swimming for next year, so we don't have to pay that all year, because it's another mortgage payment basically every month. And, so like did all that kind of stuff, and then said, okay, everything's just going to the business bank account. Now let's talk to an accountant. And that's kind of how it went. And then I had to say, look, this is the money that I think we need to live every month and be okay and comfortable, and not like the business isn't running out of money. And so when we saw 6 months of that, or more, it was actually more. That was about 50% more than I thought we needed, and I think I was wrong. I think we were basically getting what we needed, and I had estimated that we needed about 50% less. Well, and I think I was wrong. I think it would have been really tight if we had less. So then by December, we were hitting that number consistently. We were actually going up a little bit, and I said, I really can't do both of these. I'm so tired. I can't keep doing it. I don't get to see you guys. I'm really tired.
Yeah,
I want to go full time. And we had money in the bank.
Yeah.
Or in the business bank. And I said, like, almost enough money to like cover 6 or 8 months of salary. Can we do this?
Yeah.
And my wife was like, yeah, okay, let's do it.
You mentioned
and
payroll.
then in December,
do you have employees?
Yeah. Me.
It's just you. Okay. All right.
I pay myself so that I can give myself retirement benefits.
Got it.
So yeah, it's just me. He's getting a very good deal on the payroll cost, but I'm like, it doesn't matter. I just need to not screw any of this up.
Well, and it's
automate.
Scalable this way too. You've got a system in place, so if you do get to the point where you start hiring people.
I was going to ask, so now that you've gotten 6 months under your belt, what's next? Are you planning on continuing to build this as a business, or do you think this will be more of a lifestyle thing? I'm
not very good at using it as a lifestyle thing. I'm not working less than I was working before. So that's the trick, right? So you're working like crazy. You're working your day job. You're working this job, and you're like, man, I'm working so many hours. It's so hard. And then you quit your day job, and you're like, okay, I'm going to be able to like work out in the morning and do this and do that. And if you're not scheduling all that stuff and making that part of your workday, you're not going to do it, because something we haven't really talked about. But the moment I started doing this, the value of time equation went completely different. Like it just shifted so dramatically.
Oh yeah.
Like for me, spending 2 days upgrading a printer totally made sense when I was just hobbyist playing around. Even if I was shipping some product like print order, like that totally made sense. Now I'm like, my printer broke. It's gonna take me 45 minutes to fix it. I'm not gonna worry about that. I got other stuff to do. Right? Like
exactly.
That is not time well spent. And so the value of time equation, I mean, it was amazing how fast that just shifted. And so now the value of time equation still is like, if I push more features, if I improve HueForge, my customers who have paid me will be happier. More people will be drawn into it. Like there's this draw. It's just like content creation. I mean, it is content creation, but not on the YouTube side. But then there's and I need to make tutorial videos so people know how to do this. And so that people aren't asking me questions all the time about how to do this, because I can just point them to the video. Like all this kind of stuff starts getting in your head. And then you're like, oh, I'm still up till 2 a.m. working, and then taking my kid to swim at 4:30 in the morning. Like it's just like you have to be like, I've had to say no. You know, I'm taking my kid to swim in the morning. I got to go to bed. Like it's done.
Sure.
You know, and then like, hey, 3 days a week, I'm just watching TV or doing stuff with my family at night and not downstairs again.
Yeah.
Like when I'm done with my workday, I'm done. And then like nights that I do need to do a live stream or I do need to go just hang out in my community and be part of it, I'll do it, but it's not every night. I try not to do that every night now. But there was a period of time where I was like all day, every day.
It takes discipline, absolutely, and it's still, you know, having done it years and years now, and I'm sure Andrew can say the same thing, that it's an imperfect thing. There's times where that slides and whatnot, but you know, the trade-off is you do have that freedom, and you know, it always takes longer than we think it's going to, and but that's okay. I think as we get older, though, you start to become a more fierce defender of your time. So I'm glad that you've already gone in with that mindset. My question then is, as you continue to grow, what is the growth lever for you to pull, and what is maybe the piece that you're going to first hand off so that you can free up? Is it the support piece? Is it hiring another developer? What are you thinking?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, I only ask good questions.
You only ask really good questions. So I actually have 2 or 3 other. So I have one other use case, completely separate use case that people have asked me to implement a HueForge Lite tool for. It would be like 99% HueForge code and then 10 or 1% new code, and it would take away all the color sliders and everything. So I thought about that, branching out into a different field.
Light tool, like go back to lithophane? Is that what we're talking about? What do we mean?
No, we're actually talking about completely different, not 3D printing.
Okay.
I'm going to be a little cagey.
Okay,
and then actually the thing I'm kind of interested in right now is, I've always had this core, what's the word I want to use? Core concept of HueForge that you do not need a multicolor printer to do a HueForge. It's never more than 1 swap per layer. You can do it on any consumer level printer that lets you swap per layer, even if it needs a firmware update or something like that. And I've had people on printers that will not pause and let them swap, that are literally just live swapping between layers, like they're hitting pause on the terminal.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's crazy to me, but okay, go do that thing, like.
Oh, I thought you were like they were just like cutting the filament and like loading it in, like going full send on the
think
fly.
Someone has done that, but most of them will hit like pause on it because they can hit pause on the LCD and it'll move out of the way, and then they can reload filament, and then but they have to be watching like, what layer are we on? Okay, just finished the layer, went to the next layer. Okay, pause it.
Who has that kind of time? That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Right?
Okay, fine.
No,
that's
thank
nuts.
you.
So, staring at the print. Okay.
But there are very legitimate use cases and very legitimate desires to be able to do multiple swaps per layer, like flat HueForge prints. Like how nice would it be if the marble on the chessboard was actually shiny and flat and had a build plate surface on it rather than being a little bit textured, even though it's a very minor texture, because marble is polished and flat, like that kind of stuff. And I'm looking at that as a plugin ecosystem, where it's an added cost plugin that you can choose to add to HueForge if you want that capability. But if you don't want that capability or don't have that capability in your printer, it doesn't get added into the cost for you.
The
at all.
HueForge App Store is born. I love it.
Yes.
Well, but also, I really want to I really want to provide an opportunity for people who maybe gave away a lot of their work before they realized it was a product, and now everyone can do it, to make a plugin, bring it into HueForge where it makes sense, and then get a portion of that revenue. And I'll do primary coding for it. Obviously, I'll get more revenue if I do primary coding for it. Or if you want to hire a coder yourself, or you want to do the coding yourself and just work with me to integrate it, then obviously I get a much lower cut of that revenue. And then you can get paid for the work you've done by making it even easier than what you've shown people how to do in Fusion or with image editors and stuff like that.
I think that's a fantastic idea. I like
That's
that,
really cool.
and a good way to potentially scale, faster if you create a, system. I don't know if it's building an API. I don't know what it is. I guess it's, since it's all.
Pretty much. I need to give it an API of sorts that you can bring a library in, and then HueForge will see it's there. You can say, oh, I want to use this mode, and then it'll.
Which is a whole other set of wizardry. So good luck on that.
Yeah,
I think it's a great idea. And then what about the hires, I mean, are you like, I want to stay solo as long as you can? I mean, like, it seems like it's a viable solopreneur business, and that allows you to at least balance your lifestyle,
Right.
control variables somewhat.
I have certainly considered like a virtual assistant or something to do customer service for me.
Yeah.
Because that does take, most of that is pretty pre-canned responses that don't take that much time, and it's mostly like, read the fact,
Right.
please.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not. But yeah, it is a pretty viable solopreneur thing right now. It is possible that with something like plugins or things like that, it might make a ton of sense to hire someone to just write a plugin for me, and pay them off for that, and then get the code and do the support for that. That might make more sense to allow more plugins to be available in a shorter period of time. But right now, I don't really feel the need on the development side to bring someone else in. Maybe that's just me not wanting them to see my code. Every developer is terrified about the developer seeing their code.
I mean, I remember that. Yeah. Don't look at my code. Yeah.
Please don't. I will have to say that actually over the last year, I've gotten way more proficient at the toolkits that I've been using.
Well, it's because AI
and like
writes it
learned
all
a whole
now.
lot about.
Right? Yeah. It's all Copilot.
No. Okay. So
I'm
so
teasing.
ChatGPT, I've been using ChatGPT as like a coworker, like an idiot check coworker. Like, but ChatGPT understands the high concept you're trying to do, but writes super buggy code.
Yeah.
So like 90% of the time, I'm like, wait, I'm reading this code. This isn't going to work, right? Because you're doing this. And it's like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm like, so you're like the guy who understands what I'm trying to do, understands the basics, can get a framework, but then I really still have to write all the code because if I let you do it, it's going to be wrong.
As long as it's not passive aggressive about it, I'm like, wait, are you really a programmer, or because you don't seem like you really know what you're doing? Interesting. It's just enough to be dangerous, right? Like that's the phase.
You really have to. Yeah. I use it for the framework or to validate my idea. Like, hey, can I do this? And yes, here, let me give you an implementation. I'm like, yeah, that implementation doesn't look right. Oh yeah, let me give you another implementation. It's the same. Like, what, you change anything? So you definitely have to take everything with multiple grains of salt.
Sure.
But it is actually a helpful thing, and I never give it my source code. Like, it never gets to see my source code. I'm always just asking it questions because like Samsung famously leaked a bunch of their source code by feeding it to ChatGPT. The engineers did. Oh, we need to solve this problem. We need to solve this problem. Find the bug, and they just give it a block of code, and it would,
Well, my favorite thing is you can actually like talk ChatGPT into coming to your side of it. So if it's like starting to argue with you, you can like, but actually I've been doing this way, and like it seems to be remarkably like flexible in that way. If you've had a long enough conversation with it, to be like, you can convince it anything. It seems at some point, but I don't know. Maybe that's changed.
The big thing is like, I want one of the times that I'm like, hey, isn't this wrong because of X, Y, and Z? I want one of the times for it to be like, no, this is right. You're wrong.
Yeah.
And this is why. Like, and it never is. It's always like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. You're right.
To be critical about. Jeez. you need like that, just like ego builder mode. Turn that slider turned up a little bit. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, Steve, we could go on for quite a bit, but we're gonna let you go back to servicing your tickets and making HueForge better, because frankly, I want that color match out in the wild. So really quick, for those that aren't aware of it, do you want to tease that and maybe anything else that's to come soon? Talk about more future stuff. I mean, you kind of did a little, but go ahead.
Yeah, a little bit. So color match is what's really coming next. Color match is going to be, it flips the script on how you build a mesh instead of the way HueForge works now, where based on the luminance mode you pick, it builds a mesh based on some rules, either just straight luminance, or it builds it based on colors and luminance. Color match lets you set one color core, that's the block of colors in the middle, that defines how the mesh is built. And then you can use your other color core to color it with real filaments. And that allows you to use fake colors you don't own to set the mesh up. And then you can bring colors you do own and filaments you do have to make a good looking image out of that. It won't maybe match exactly, but it's going to match a lot closer. It lets you get rid of artifacts between the color sections. One of the issues with the current color versions is you have to go from black to color to white within that section. And maybe you don't have a really dark red, or maybe you don't have a really light pink or white in that red zone, and you really just want that middle zone. Color match allows that. I'm working right now a lot on a walkthrough, like follow along tutorial series for color match, because as powerful as it is, it's pretty complicated to understand how to start going at it. Once you understand how to start going at it, especially if you're new to HueForge, and there's so many people who come new to HueForge and want to just do everything all at once.
Right.
If you're already really experienced and you know how to blend filaments, you probably can skip through the tutorial pretty fast. You'll probably get them really quickly. But if you're new and you want to come in right away on a super complicated image, you're going to want to go step by step slowly and work through those tutorials. So I'm working on a series of tutorial videos that are hopefully under 10 minutes each that will ship with, whoa, my camera decided to zoom in on me for some reason.
I thought you were really trying to drive that point home, and it was just like, bam!
That will basically it will help you get from A to Z and know how to approach it, because there's a lot of caveats and a lot of things that are important to know when you're doing color match. But at the same time, once you do know how to do it, you know, Cyanide and Ian regularly send me images they've made in 5 minutes that would have taken image editing and tons of time to work out in HueForge normally, that they can now do in 5 minutes with, you know, fewer filaments than you would expect.
That's amazing.
So it's very powerful, but takes time.
That's
you know
really
what's
cool.
crazy is I have to imagine there's a ton of people out there like me that I just want a monkey mode that's just like going to get me 90% of the way there, and I don't care if it's exactly, because like I just don't. You know, and I'm sure this has been told to you multiple times, and it's not an easy thing to do because every picture is going to have different nuance and all that stuff, and not everybody's got a robust filament library and all these things. So finding that sweet spot of, look, I've only got these filaments, like get me as close to this picture as possible without having to tweak a bunch of things, like monkey mode, go.
Yeah.
Possible?
If you can I mean, obviously it's possible, but you'd have to highly constrain your filament choices. The problem is that the search space, if you're just going through my library, is huge, because it's not just a sort of search space, it's a third and fourth. I use 4 colors to get skin tone.
Right.
You know, it's hard to do a reliable skin tone in one color. You need that different set of colors as it goes through the shading.
Well, and my
so
skin tone versus
when you're
yours
searching
versus somebody else is going to be
right. Yep. And when you're running, and I'm still not good at non-white skin tones. They're still very, very tricky because the filaments don't blend. They're much more opaque, and so you have a lot fewer options. But when you start doing 2, 3, 4 colors deep, your search space, you know, with 500 filaments or 600 filaments in the library, your search space is tremendous. And so if you were to come and say, I have these 4, that's actually an easier problem than using the filaments in the library or the filaments I own, which is 90. Tell me how to do this image. Like, that's a huge amount of computation to try to work that out. And like, I never approached HueForge as a photocopier. I always approached it as an artist tool.
Yeah.
So that may be something that actually does come in potentially as like a plugin.
Yeah.
Where someone says, hey, I've got an approach to do this. I'm like, hey, let's bring that in as a plugin. You make some money off of that. I make, you know, people happy. That isn't my core constituency. And, you know, we make everybody happy on that.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that I'm, you know, would be excited, because I can't do all the development for every feature that everybody wants.
I'd be excited for that too.
So,
yeah. I think that's an interesting challenge, and I look forward to seeing how that pans out, because part of your challenge with the 3D printing is so much of the 3D printing community, like, they don't care about the artistry. They don't care. Like, we're so just saturated with people that just want go to Thingiverse, go to printables, grab thing, print thing, move on, right? And so I wonder how limiting, like, if somebody opens up HueForge and goes, this is too complicated, like, I'm not getting, you know, a good, reasonable, quick result. You know, it's not to say that it won't get there, but I don't.
Right.
I'd be curious to know how many of your people take that artist approach versus just the pragmatic, like, I just need something and move on. So, but like you say, maybe, you know, plugin library or a way to, like, get other people to help develop those things I think it's a great strategy. So. Brother, thank you so much. Everybody in the chat, if you're still with us, thank you so much. I wish everyone a happy Friday. I know it's a hot one here. I'm looking forward to just hunkering down in my maybe do a little design work. We didn't get to talk about our wins this week, but we're going to save it up for next week, Andrew. So 2 wins next week.
All right.
And
all right.
You're off the hook, Steve. But thank you so much. We'll have to have you back. And happy Friday, everybody. We will catch you on the next one. Till then, see ya.
See ya.
bye.